Cut. Jon Dunning here, along with Jason All. We are talking about 2017's Hate Crime, directed by Steven Esteb.
I'm John DeMarco. Your son murdered my son?
I gotta believe we have some kind of chance.
We do. Don't we?
All he ever wanted was to make you proud!
Was proud.
Why didn't you tell me?
Because if I told you, you wouldn't have come.
Oh, you're right. I wouldn't have come.
Please.
Good God, John. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Hey. You really that embarrassed of us?
No, I'm ashamed of us. This is fucking disgusting.
Don't you
Fucking dare!
Don't you
Fucking dare think about it!
God does exact his justice.
They're gonna kill him in less than an hour.
I deserve what's coming.
Yes, I suppose you do. Anything he wanted, I was there. Every game, every match.
Because he knew how much it meant to you.
I saw him. Our kids, they think they know everything there is to know about us.
Here.
What is this?
It was the part he was afraid you would see.
I wanted to see your son take his last breath on this earth.
Raven! Raven, I love you! I love you!
I'm sorry for what happened to your boy.
We always talk a lot about just kind of the film industry in general moving over to your streaming services, your Amazon Primes and your now Disney Pluses, your Netflixes. And this is going to be kind of a series that showcases that, not only showcases that format, but also just things with kind of a smaller distribution. Before we dive into the good and the bad of Hate Crime, why don't we talk a little bit about the director of the film and the writer of the film, and that's Steven Esteb and Jonah Tapper.
So Steven Esteb is a guy that's written and directed some movies before. He's got one called Freebird coming out pretty soon, and he's directed a few movies, including one called Baller Blockin' that I watched back in 2000 that I thought was really just a hilarious movie. He had one more recently come out called Dirty Politics. Hate Crime is a couple of years old, but it's just getting added to streaming services now. I kind of like the addition of Jonah Tapper as a writer on this film. I feel like he had what was a really interesting premise. Hooking up with somebody who was an experienced cinematographer to get this movie made, I think was a good choice for everybody involved, because I feel like Steven Esteb's strength is as a director and Jonah Tapper's is probably as a writer. I think them teaming up was probably a good move.
This is Esteb's third film. You mentioned Baller Blockin', which I wish I would have seen. I'm a little jealous that just seeing the cast, that looks absolutely phenomenal.
It is a veritable who's who of the hip-hop industry in 2000.
There's a little time warp. And then Dirty Politics as well. So it looks like there's like an ongoing theme with Steven Esteb movies where he is always trying to kind of have some kind of a commentary, which I think that was one of the things that I liked the most was just the story itself, the theme of the movie, and the theme of his other films. I like when filmmakers have something to say, but I don't like when they kind of beat you over the face with the message.
Yeah, his movies are very socially conscious, and this movie had a very good premise.
Yeah, and Jonah Tapper, this is his first writing outing. This is he got the sole writing credit on this. I don't want to say like, oh, everyone starts somewhere, because that just sounds really condescending, and it's hard to write. Like, writing anything is super tough, just as tough as directing a film. Did the script work 100% in this? No, not even 50% in my opinion. But I think that if you would have told me that this gentleman only wrote one movie, I was a little surprised, because it felt like someone that wrote film before.
Yeah, this was kind of an ambitious first project, I would say. He might have been sitting on this for a while. It seemed, I don't want to use the word mature almost. You know, this doesn't seem like a first-time screenwriter's script. It was, you know, it was set up pretty well. You know, I really liked the pace at which the plot revealed itself. Like a real good student of good film writing. Respectfully
disagree with the pacing in the film. In my opinion, was one of the weakest parts and one of the hardest parts for me, at least.
Not the pacing of the movie, just
the pacing of the script.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, because you kind of said that you didn't know what was going on for the first half hour, but I liked that.
Okay.
There was a little. So the film centers around two families. These two young men were lovers in college. One of them killed the other. You don't know why, but he's on death row. There's a family that's a farmer, and then there's a family going to the execution, and you don't know initially which young man belonged to which family. And I kind of liked that it revealed itself, you know, at a good pace. Where I think you probably ran into some issues watching it is the fact that almost all of the plot was revealed through exposition dialogue with conversations that would never have taken place at the time they took place.
Right.
It's like, well, now that our kid's being executed, let's finally have the conversation about how you never told him you loved him. It's like, really? We're going to do this now? It made sense for exposition, but sometimes the exposition it just doesn't make sense for the timeline of the film. So, like, I didn't really like that per se. I like that it didn't tell you everything up front, but I didn't like the way that it was delivered necessarily.
I really like the way that the film opened. You get, and it's no spoil, you know, we just told you that this one boy killed another boy, but it shows you in the opening credits, essentially. And then it does cut over to, I could say the main characters are Tom Brown and Guinea Brown, and that's played by Amy Redford, who is Robert Redford's daughter, and Kevin Bernhardt, who has been a kind of a working man's actor. We just found out that he was, what would you say, like one of the Cenobites?
He was one of the Cenobites in Hellraiser 3.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's got like a very distinct look, and I'm sure that, you know, we've seen him in a million things. This was his kind of time to shine, and like I said, the film starts out real strong. I think that's a very evocative image to start your narrative, especially a narrative of this scope. And then it just kind of bogs down into the parents kind of sitting on the porch, and we're not really talking about anything. And then the phone rings, and that's where I think that they find out that, you know, what has happened, and you find out that way, which is kind of off camera. I didn't mind that so much, but it was more the reactions I took issue with, because it's, you know, it's for how virulent their fights became. They sure were pretty happy and normal at first, and then as soon as these things happened, it was like you said, it was like, oh, now we get to talk.
Possible the fact that like he didn't do any appeals, and he just, you know, went right to the execution. The governor refused to stay, so like, you know, there was no stopping it. They finally had some conversations that, you know, were hard and they were putting off, and like, you know, that was the whole thing about Kevin Bernhardt's character, was that he was just real stoic and, you know, didn't say the things out loud he needed to say. So like, that was a possibility, that, you know, one explanation for the fact that, oh, all of a sudden we're going to fight about this thing that's been going on for 2 years. I think that revealing stuff with exposition takes practice, and I think it's sort of become a little tired, and, you know, people who study film are like, oh, they're doing this again. It's sort of a trick that doesn't really work in 2019.
Sure.
So it's definitely tough to pull off, and this movie didn't do it perfectly, but I think it's something you can improve at.
Conversely, I think that sometimes when they revealed things through exposition, it worked really well. Like one of my favorite scenes in the film is when Tom is sitting at the table, and he finds out his son was executed via the radio, and he just has this like real, you know, the same kind of even-keeled stoic look. And I felt that, like, that was one part where I'm like, damn, like, this guy is immovable emotionally. So there were some times when it was effective. Now, the phone call, I'll call it the phone call scene, where it went on for far too long, and it was mostly just them passing the phone back and forth and them saying Ray, Raymond. I think I had a counter of like 30 times. Them just screaming their son's name into the phone. It just, that didn't work at all for me. It's a pretty small ensemble cast, but it has John Schneider from the Dukes of Hazzard, and also Laura Kayetti, I want to say Kayetti, and she's been in like a ton of stuff, like Django Unchained, Enemy of the State, Now You See Me. So these two actually had some real resumes under their belt, and I wish that we would have seen them more in the film.
Yeah, they were quite good. You know, maybe it's because they were in small doses that they seemed better, but I really felt like they were very effective. And I feel like Marie DeMarco was called upon to act a little bit less, because she was sort of like, why are we here? Okay, I'm leaving. As opposed to having to like really emote. So I think they might have benefited from being called upon to do less, but also I wish they had been given bigger roles.
I thought the interaction between Raymond Brown, who's the son on death row, and John DeMarco, played by John Schneider, that was real effective. Like I said, I just wish they had John Schneider kind of featured a little bit more, and that's kind of how they sold it as a top billing. I know you got to put your kind of your names of your movie, focus on them and put them in the marquee, but it was a bit misleading, because I feel like 65-70% of the film was in the Browns' kitchen.
Expensive to shoot out of prison, probably.
Which was a cool setting. I mean, aside from like you have to kind of use movie logic, and you have to suspend disbelief a little bit, thinking that, because I think they even referenced that the timeline of which he's on death row, and I think it didn't really matter. It was more of a metaphor, like they were just trying to push the trial as fast as possible. And a lot of other films, probably with a lot bigger budgets, focus on the trials more, and that's where you get a lot of the meat of this kind of a film, where this one wasn't about that. It was all about dealing with the repercussions of your loved ones and how it affects other people.
I did like the message of the film a lot, and I wish a premise this good had been executed a little better, but I still think it's worth watching.
Real strange. I don't want to say filler, because I don't know if it was used for filler, but just strange decisions that kind of took me out of it. Like the rushed death penalty, letting the dogs out, like that was a major plot device, which, I mean, I guess it kind of straightens itself out at the end. There's like killer pigs around all of a sudden.
Oh, you can't have a movie coming to VOD in 2019 without a good feral hogs reference. Luckily, it was only 1 and not 30 to 50, because he was under-equipped for that situation.
Right. There's one point where they're yelling after their son's executed, and she says something like, "We're never gonna live this down. We're never gonna get rid of it." And that made me feel like, okay, do these parents care more, and especially the mother? Does she care more about losing her son, or more about her public image now? And I didn't like questioning that, but I felt like they just kind of threw that in, maybe because they wrote that scene into a corner. I'm not sure, but Jonah Tapper, this is his first outing. I feel like it, for the most part, it was competently written, but there was just these strange add-ins that just kind of spun in circles, and I was really confused.
Well, I think had it been done better, it would have been a better movie, obviously. So I kind of think there's a lot of potential here for a first outing. To have such a good premise and to, do a decent job executing it, I think it's really a lot tougher than we might think. One bright spot for me was Jordan Salem, who played Raymond Brown. I thought he was really good. He seems like an up-and-comer. He's been in a lot of really good projects, and I expect to see a little bit more of him, maybe a little bit, fewer bit parts and more front and center. I think I think he was good in this in particular, and he's been in a lot of stuff that I like.
Two things that I can say that really worked, which surprisingly that this film pulled off, that I usually don't like in other films that have like big, directors behind, like, helming the projects is, I think, the dream sequences of Tom falling asleep, seeing his son kind of run through the cornfield. They were just placed in a really appropriate way. And then also the scene at the diner where Guinea's sitting there and the voiceover. I usually do not like voiceover at all. I think this was real effective, and I'm like, oh wow, this actually kind of even righted some of the wrongs that I was feeling where these characters come from, where it was kind of ambiguous before. I'm like, oh, okay, he's not just a homophobe, he's just shitty at emotions because that's how he was brought up, and it kind of
definitely stick with the movie because I feel like it wraps up in a satisfying way.
And you get to see the pig, so that's
true. Yeah. The feral pig should have gotten top billing.
More screen time than John Schneider.
If you want millennials to watch this movie, you have to give them something, and telling them that there is a feral pig attack in the movie, I feel like. Yeah. You could rebrand the movie, have that on the DVD case.
You could find this film on Amazon Prime. You could stream it for $3.99. I could think of far worse things to spend $4 on.
No, I think this movie's greatest strength is its premise. Anyone I described this premise to said it sounded really good. And it wasn't a total punt. I'm looking forward to seeing more out of this the screenwriter.
I don't know if I could really say I'm like super looking forward to anything. I don't have to day one look at a Steven Esteb film just because of some of the shot composition and just the way, like, just some lighting choices and stuff like that. It just felt a little flat for my taste. I tend to be more of a flashy person. I like my Villeneuves and like Wes Anderson, stuff like that. So this just felt a little school playish to me. But again, it was a film that was made and had a real cool premise.
This would have worked fantastic as a play. I think what I liked about it was the fact that there weren't a ton of settings, and I didn't like how long the scenes were because it felt like they dragged on a little bit. But at the same time, I feel like if this were on a stage, I think people would have a little bit more patience for how long the scenes tended to drag, and the fact that it was only shot at like 2 or 3 locations really would have lent itself to the stage. I think this would have worked really well as a play.
Felt like they were kind of really struggling with stretching out enough content to make the runtime. And even like the scene with Tom going out and talking to the ex-girlfriend a little bit, which again, there's parts of that I like, but also there's a lot of just, it feels a little chubby. Like the runtime feels a little chubby where it could have been edited, but then it would have been a half an hour. So it's a hard balancing act to write a good film and direct a good film. It was a very admirable attempt.
So ultimately, I think if you are someone who likes social justice issues, I think this is a film for you because, again, I think the premise is very compelling. And if you go into it with the mindset like this would have worked a little bit better as a play, but I'm willing to sit down and watch it as a movie, I think a lot of people will find this fairly enjoyable. Don't just take our word for it. This movie's done fairly well at film festivals. And it's won quite a few awards.
Yeah, probably the coolest one was at the MIFA LGBT Film Festival in 2016 for the Programmer's Choice Award for Steven Esteb. That's pretty awesome. New Orleans Film Festival, it won a cinematography award. You have the Northeast Film Festival, it won a couple awards there it won the whole festival, Director's Choice for the director again, and then it was nominated for Best Actor in a Film for Kevin Bernhardt, who played Tom Brown. And then the Tryon International Film Festival, it won the Best Feature and the Human Rights and Dignity Awards. So pretty high acclaim for this film, which probably deservedly so.
Yeah, it's a socially conscious movie, and the director's, been recognized for how he handled this. So if that sways your opinion at all, that's the thing that happened.
You heard what we thought about the film. Why don't you tell us what you think about the film now? Go ahead and go on over to Amazon Prime, spend your $4, go see Hate Crime, and then come back to the comment section on this video and tell us what you thought. While you're doing that, go ahead and give us a thumbs up and share it around just to let people know that we're reviewing films. If you want to talk movies, you can find me on Twitter at OrzovDunn.
And I'm at Jason E. Alt. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.